Think about this for a minute. If nothing ever triggered your complex PTSD symptoms, they would be very unlikely to be activated. Now, every time that you get triggered into some symptom, a panic attack, a migraine, feeling out of your body, feeling suddenly desperate or emotionally over the top, that is when CPTSD does its damage in your life. Now, it's bad enough what happened to you in the past, but continuing to re-traumatize yourself with triggered behaviors only makes things worse. So, for all the work you might have done in the past, exploring what happened when you were little, who did it, how it affected your life, that's all good for the long term. But there's this immediate benefit if you can learn to notice what triggers you right now and then to calm that triggered response. What happens when you have past trauma is, it gets triggered, you go into a trauma response. It's physiological, it's neurological. And once it starts, it's very hard to turn back. But if you can calm the trigger before the symptoms really get going, you just shut the door on your trauma-driven behaviors and they can't get in so easily. Or that's the goal. Now, it takes practice. And by the way, if you think you have CPTSD, complex PTSD, the kind that comes from chronic ongoing stress, like for kids who were abused or neglected, you can learn about that. Check out the quizzes on my free tools page linked below, down in the description section. For the next several weeks, I'm going to be talking about some common triggers. And you might want to be sure that you're subscribed so that you get a notification each time I publish a video about triggers. You hit subscribe, hit that little bell. And I'll be talking about triggers that often show up in people who have grown up abandoned or ostracized. I'll talk about triggers common in people who were raised in a controlling environment. And today I'm going to talk about triggers that show up in people who grew up in an out-of-control environment, where parents may have had alcoholism or addictions, or were for some reason very neglectful of the needs and the sense of order in the household, or disregarded your need for safety, for example. Now, how do I know all this? I grew up like that. That's the kind of household I come from. I come from a family where about half the members have a very active addiction, if they're still alive, and all the bad stuff that goes along with addiction and alcoholism. That's what my home was like when I was little. Now, things were totally out of control. It was a mess. There wasn't always food. There was violence sometimes. Nothing was predictable. It was hard to plan things like birthday parties. There was a 2-year period where we had no hot water. So, like most kids, I just wanted to seem normal. I wanted to fit in, but I was ashamed of what was going on at home. So I worked overtime to try to fit in. And it affected me deeply, of course. And I used to think, that I was so good at sort of denying how bad it was. I just thought, I don't know, I'm just paranoid. I'm just too judgmental. These are the personality sides that were coming out from me early on, like in my teens. Judgmental, paranoid, kind of a scold. And my mom used to laugh at how I would kind of stress out in the car or worrying about future plans and things. And she would call me a worrywart. But I now know I was triggered a lot of the time for good reason. And the stuff that triggered me might not bother most people, but they were super normal for a person who grew up in an out-of-control home. Now, let me know in the comments if you resonate with the symptoms that I go over, or let me know if you have some of your own, all right? Number 1, triggered by loud noises. In the home where I grew up, there was a lot of breaking glass, shouting, banging, partying with loud music when I was little. Partying not by kids, by the adults. And I lived part of my childhood in a commune, and it was very, very out of control. In adulthood, especially in my 20s, before I had begun healing my trauma, I was really panicked by the feeling that, everything's getting crazy. I don't know, there's clothes coming off, things are getting loud. When I heard any noises like this, breaking glass used to make me practically fall down in a panic attack. It was so triggering. Angry voices, certain like hard rock music from the early 70s, I still don't want to hear it. It still just kind of brings back that yucky feeling like everything's just going to a very bad place. Second trigger, getting your sleep disturbed. When you're a kid in an out-of-control household, you end up going to bed way past bedtime because no one's paying attention. You could be on the sofa at a party or sleeping in a corner, and someone trips on you or sits on you, and that used to happen. And this is also how so many kids end up getting inappropriately touched. And to this day, when I get abruptly awakened in the night, that like, I feel it's not just a surprise, it's a feeling of being ready to fight. And luckily for my husband, this trigger has calmed a lot to the right size. Like triggers that come up in your sleep are pretty hard to change. It's not like you're conscious. And I personally, it's when I wake up in the morning when I'm the most vulnerable to emotional flashbacks. But that thing where I get woken up in the middle of the night, I'm like, that's really calmed down. You do need a little vigilance while you sleep, of course, but not like you did when you were a 6-year-old in an out-of-control household. All right, the third trigger common for people from that kind of home follows the first two, and it's just being around people who are high or drunk. I'm totally fine up to a certain point. I can't even tell you where it is exactly when people are intoxicated. It's like up to a certain point, I'm like, that's fine. It's not like I'm a teetotaler, but there's a certain sound in the voice of someone who is losing their composure on substances. There's a smell they give off that I'm really tuned into. It comes off on their breath. It's a sick smell that lingers in the bathroom after they pee, which I think is associated with a strain from all the alcohol on the kidneys. My mom had that. And so at a very young age, if the bathroom had that weird smell in it, I would immediately feel like really anxious. And that was astute. There really was, things were getting very bad right there. My little child brain got tuned into clues like that things are getting crazy. And to this day, people partying can sort of cross a line where I feel really triggered and like I need to get control over my environment. It's like a feeling that comes. Number 4, I've got a similar trigger, and this is with people doing sexual things in public. So our commune in Berkeley in 1971 had a lot of that, and it was really upsetting for me. I was, 8 at the time, and that goes hand in hand with the drugs and the alcohol and the loudness and, just feeling like nobody's paying attention to safety, order, or anything like that. So to this day, I'm just not that comfortable. I did a very early blog post about finally just deciding when everybody goes to some hot tub and gets naked, I just don't want to. I don't want to. I'm old enough, I get to not do that. So that's for me. Okay, number 5 is speaking up. Do you get triggered when you speak up about something, sharing an idea, or even harder, saying when something is bothering you? Because if you grew up in an out-of-control household, speaking up was very likely to get you, not heard, right? You could get laughed at, you could get ignored, you could get yelled at. You would be attracting attention that would, whatever the bad thing that happens to kids in your house would start zooming in on you when you spoke up. So the price feels too high. It's triggering even to, think I want to say something sometimes. Do you ever get that? Have you had to overcome that in adulthood? Number 6 is the opposite. When you don't speak up, holding in the thing that needed to be said can just totally poison your thinking too. Your emotions, your body. Sharing your feelings and stating what you like or don't like, or expressing your needs, or setting a boundary, or just normal parts. That's just normal. It's part of being in a family or a relationship. So if it wasn't safe for you to do that, you may have developed a habit of either hiding how you feel or distorting how you feel so it would come out some way that you thought would be acceptable. But of course, even if they listened to you, you wouldn't get what you needed because it wasn't what you needed. Or you try not to feel it. Like, if I can just not need anything, then everything will be okay. So don't worry, Mom. I'll be good. I don't need anything. A lot of us ended up with that. Then comes number 7. And you know how intoxicated or out of control parents just love spontaneity. Well, planning is not their thing, and maybe when you were little you got dragged along on some very spontaneous car trips or sleepovers or homelessness episodes, and if you complained, people acted like you were this terrible, demanding little kid. I don't know, maybe I'm projecting on you, but that happened to me. We'd be driving in the middle of nowhere, we'd be in Mexico or something in the night without enough food or water or gas, and I'd be just freaking out in the back seat because we had this car that just broke down all the time. And they go, there she is again, she's a worrywart. But I was like, no, I was correctly anticipating there's going to be trouble. And it's a lot of scrapes that we got into that were terrifying for me because I just fundamentally didn't trust that my mom or whatever grown-ups were with us were really paying adequate attention. Like, is there enough water? Is there enough food? Did we tell people where we were? Things that it's just been such a pleasure to grow up and find out you can totally take care of these things. And it's freed me up to travel again and to be a little more spontaneous. And I think there's probably still a trigger there for me. And the way you can tell is that when I take a trip, the amount of stuff that I pack on trips, it's usually twice what I need, especially with food. I just end up with so much food, and that's something I've been working on. I just got back from England. I did the London show there, which was great. We took the long plane flight back the next day, and my husband and my sons were like calling me out and like, you always have this like plastic shopping bag. I had this like Sainsbury's bag. It's always something, and it's with all these like random leftovers from our time and whatever last Airbnb we were in. And snacks, like you can get snacks at the airport, but I grew up really poor. They're expensive. You should bring everything you have in the fridge. So I basically am toting like a fridge full of snacks, and most of it isn't going to hold up. The grapes just get all smushed, and one by one I'm handing it to the flight attendant every time they come around for trash, and they're like, there you are with your bag of inedible food at the end. I'm laughing now, and I was like, is that weird? And they all three, they were like, yeah, that's weird. That's like your little OCD thing. I don't have OCD, but it's like a compulsion that I feel like, oh, you just never know. We might get stuck in the air and we won't have snacks. There is a practical element there. You should just bring the carrots that you had in the fridge because you're not going to be able to get carrots on the plane. But I take it way too far. It's a trigger and a behavior that's come to light for me recently, enough that I'm laughing at it and I'm working on it because it's also, I think, a little bit part of like food addiction of like, oh, there's not going to be enough, which has been part of me overeating a bit all through my life and kind of, struggling with that. So we're going to talk more about food and weight and all that pretty soon in videos. Another reason to subscribe. Okay, number 8, out of control parenting styles can leave a big trigger on you around getting stood up. You have a plan with someone and they didn't show up. And, after school care memories, anyone? When your mom or dad doesn't come or nobody picks you up and you're the last kid there, it feels terrible. And I had a really debilitating trigger with this in my 20s. And I remember when somebody I was dating didn't show up when they said they would. And they actually were sort of being inconsiderate, but the level that I was freaking out was way out of proportion with that. They were like 40 minutes late and this was before we could text each other or anything. They were 40 minutes late. I could survive the experience, but I would just sort of psychologically flip over into this physiological state, and it was a rage feeling. And this is where I talk about sometimes the emotions just like traveling down my arms. That was an early cue before I had validations that yes, a trauma response is physiological. I could just feel it going through my body, and I think, oh no, I'm just kind of going into that state where I'm not going to be pleasant the rest of this day no matter what. Like no matter how much I tell myself, oh, it's a good explanation of why he was so late, or, I shouldn't get so upset about this. There was no turning back. And I would just sort of be like this little, hedgehog with rabies, it's like waiting to bite. Couldn't get through it. So that's so much what my CPTSD was like for me. But now I know, yeah, it's a trigger. It's normal that I was triggered like that. It would bring up a feeling of just total loss, despair, panic. It went along with a pattern in my CPTSD behavior where I was choosing people who were going to stand me up too, which is what a lot of my videos are about, is how to choose better and then how to deal with the ups and downs of a relationship better too. Those two things together make a huge difference. But it's clear to me now, it's a normal trigger. I'm not so weird. That's what happens when your parents didn't care for you or pick you up consistently. All right, number 9, a trigger is that feeling that someone is lying or trying to manipulate you. So come on, get in the car, it's fine. It's a lie. Or eat the food that has mayonnaise on it that's been sitting out for 20 hours. Stop being so picky. That's a lie. Or you're upset, my God, everything with you has to be this big Greek tragedy. And yeah, I got told that. It's not a Greek tragedy. I was very upset about something that was happening, but I was manipulated into believing that the problem wasn't what was upsetting me, it was that I was feeling upset. And boy, does that carry on in your life and show up as what we call around here crap fit, right? Where you fit yourself to crappy behavior and crappy people and always blame yourself and see if you can just handle it better. Okay, trigger number 10, not doing anything. Just being idle. This is a big thing for grown-up children of alcoholics. It's pretty common. It's stressful not to be busy because, you know, the feelings are always lurking on the edges of the day. And if you give up control and all that suppressed, you know, anxiety, you just don't know what's going to come in and get you. And it's how a lot of us survived. Part of healing is making peace with both downtime and being able to take it easy and uptime where you need to step up and be productive. You got to do both. And this like swing between I can't do anything to I can't stop doing things could have a lot to do with vagus nerve activity, the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. If one dominates or the other dominates, you can get very like overactive or, you know, sluggish. So healing your CPTSD helps bring you to the middle of that where you can be both calm, take it easy, step up, be active in a good, you know, good ratio. All right, number 11, the 11th trigger, arguing in public. Ugh. Whether you're hearing it or doing it, it is absolutely horrible in my experience. Just so much shame, so much shame. Have you ever seen someone or been in the car with someone who demands that you stop the car so they can get out right now in the middle of nowhere? I've seen that, but also I've been the person who wants to get out of the car. And it's a level of drama I hope to never go back to again in my life. But that's how intense the CPTSD symptom and the need to get away from the conflict can be, or to get out of the, you know, public arguing. And I teach techniques that you can use whether you're in the car, about to get in the car, or over on the side of the road when the car sped off because you insisted on getting out. I have the techniques that can help bring you back to center so that you can figure out what to do in a better way. And if you want to see that, that is my free daily practice course. It's down in the description section under this video and every video I make. I hope you come take it. If you take that free course, you can learn and try it in less than an hour. But the lovely thing is I'll invite you. I'll then send you emails and invite you to free Zoom calls with me. And we use the techniques together. A bunch of people come on the call each time, twice a month. And then you can ask me questions. You can actually talk to me directly about how it's going for you with the practice. So that's a good thing to try. All right, number 12, being in the car with somebody else driving. Yes, just driving, regular driving. Driving erratically is definitely a trigger, but just being there where you can't control the brake pedal. If you grew up with out of control parents, that can be a huge trigger. So have you ever had this where you're like one of your legs is really tired from being a passenger in the front seat and stamping on a phantom brake pedal? This is a classic metaphor for trying to gain control over an out of control situation. And of course, you know, you have no control at all over a car that somebody else is driving unless you get out of the car, out of that relationship, or out of that phase in your life where CPTSD has you attached to people who scare you in the car at all. So, number 13, big trigger, birthdays and holidays, special occasions. Talk about a Greek tragedy. That's where my emotions come up. You're all grown up, but will the people in your life remember? Will they care? Will it be enough? I'm laughing at myself because I've just been through this so much. And finally, I have healing to the point that I can enjoy special occasions and extra enjoy it if people remember and do something nice for me. But I can just enjoy it because it's a special day to me. And this is kind of connected to the 14th trigger, which is times when you're supposed to get accolades, right? Congratulations, compliments, take a bow. It's so triggering for some of us because, again, it attracts attention. And so many times have you been let down when, you know, you were in a school play and all the other kids got, you know, their parents brought bouquets or something and your parents forgot to come, or they came but they didn't bring the thing, or they just weren't in touch. And these can be small things or they can be big things. But that's definitely been a trigger in the past for me. And it's this weird kind of tension between fearing that you're a victim who isn't going to get enough and then that you're getting too much attention and you're getting too much. You know, it's just like it can't really hit the right spot. You're sort of not having the experience authentically. It's just tripping about like, how's everybody handling this? It's okay. That's a really normal way to be wounded after people did that. Their level of attention on you wasn't consistent. So far, my healing has allowed me to get a round of applause or somebody, you know, gets a profuse thank you from somebody, and I can just be glad and smile. Or I can not get applause and not really trip about it. It's so freeing to be just neutral and along for the ride of my life. And finally, one of the strongest triggers for people who grew up in out-of-control households where they got so little help is in adulthood when you have to ask for help. It feels so shaky and risky and shameful and hard to define. Like, what do I even say? What do I even need? Like, we have so little practice, like putting that thought together. And I just often feel like a wobbly little lamp, that's about to come unscrewed from the base, and you have to keep propping it up. So can you actually ask? Is it too much to ask? Should you be able to handle this yourself? Could you, if you pushed yourself, handle it yourself? The cure for this trigger is sometimes to have something so bad happen that you have no choice. You have to be helped. And I had a breakthrough around needing help when I had a major surgery that involved, removing muscles from one of my legs to repair these other parts of my body. I had surgery everywhere. I couldn't walk. It was painful. And it was like 2 months where I couldn't totally take care of myself. And so a family member came and helped me, and it was horrible for me to have to keep asking for every single thing I ate and every time I needed the phone. But it was good for me, and it was good for my relationship with my relative. So the solution for having these triggers isn't to try to control the world, but maybe to get some boundaries around your world. Who you hang out with, who you don't, and to learn to calm your triggers so that all these decisions are no longer an involuntary reaction, but a choice. And if you haven't learned to calm those triggers, definitely come check out my free course. Thousands of people are taking it. It's something that I really love doing, is being on the calls with everyone and helping them refine their technique. And we have all these paid courses and programs and coaching things you can join, but you don't even have to have a penny. You just have to have an internet connection, maybe a phone, to come join our Zoom calls. So I'd love to have you there. Now, if you love this topic and you want to know more about how to calm your triggers rather than outsourcing responsibility for them, trying to make other people keep you from getting triggered, I've got this video lined up for you right here, and I will see you very soon.